Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the DollyFly25 from Sub250. And something to note is that this does have an option for GPS, but it looks like you have to buy the GPS separately. It does come with the mount that we put right up top here, but you're probably going to have to buy that mount as well as connect it to the connectors that are already there. There might be some Betaflight setup that you have to do. They could change the order form on their website, but as of right now, as I'm recording this, it doesn't seem to have an option to get the GPS with it and already have it configured. Also, it only comes with the DJI O3 system. So if you're running Walksnail or HD0 or analog, that too doesn't seem to be an option. So DJI O3 only. And speaking of that DJI O3, it's mounted vertically, which is unique for any of these Cinewhoops that we've seen so far. Don't know if it's going to catch on, but it's different. The motors are 1404, 4500 kV. And on those motors are the HQ DT63x3 V2 props. As you're looking at the connectors, above that is the flight controller, which is the Red Fox A3, and that is a 35 amp all-in-one. We see the connectors. This one I used for my receiver, which I did have to add, and the other connector would be for adding a GPS. Got a capacitor here at the rear, but it's not secured down, just stiff long wires. USB port has been located to the rear bottom plate. The antenna does fold all the way down for easy packing. And while we're here, we have a rubber battery mat that is sticky, as well as a sticky or texturized battery strap. XT30 for your battery connection. The DJI O3 camera, as well as VTX, is mounted down in this little holster, which you can see if you watch this, it all moves around as I flex it. The bottom plate, which is also the prop protection, looks to be 2.5 millimeters thick. And the top plate where your motors are mounted is 2 millimeters thick. It comes with this little plate that covers up our brass fittings up here for mounting accessories. When I removed mine, I pressed down and shifted it forward, and now, after it came off, it doesn't secure back on. So my technique must be not correct. It does come with a mount for an external HD camera, as well as the GPS mount. Comes with an extra set of gremmies, some zip ties, a hex key, and I got a bunch of different USB-C gap fillers. Screws to mount those accessories up front. Some additional accessories for repairs, potentially. An O3 accessory kit. We got about 8 extra screws in that bag, and a few more in this bag. It also comes with a lens protector, but I did not use it. An extra set of props, an extra battery strap, an overheat warning about the DJI O3, the typical O3 manual, and 1 sheet of stickers. It weighs just about 181 grams. They recommend their Sub250 branded 720 milliamp 4S battery, but also tested those 850s and 650s. With the 720, it weighs 248.5 grams. With the 650, it comes in a little bit heavier at 250.5 grams. And with that big old 850, it comes in at 276.9 grams. The flight we're going to watch, at least in some part, is with their recommended 720 milliamp 4S battery. I can't tell you that when you add this battery, or when you run this battery, if you add a naked GoPro, which I have one from Flywoo, and I did mount it up to this, I got 4 minutes and 45 seconds. With the 720, I got 6 minutes and 34 seconds. So just adding a naked GoPro does decrease our flight time quite a bit. Also, there's a 12-mile-an-hour wind that's relatively consistent. You probably won't hear it much on the flight audio camera. I have noticed recently with my flight audio camera, which is a Pixel 6, that it tries to kind of normalize the volume sometimes when a breeze comes up. So if you can catch that, it's usually right at the beginning of the breeze. Or you can hear like trees moving in the distance or leaves moving around, but the actual wind on the flight audio camera does not record wind very well. I've noticed that in the last few videos. I've been using the same camera for quite a while, so I'm kind of surprised that no one called that out, and I didn't notice myself when I did the mixing of the flight audio camera in with our flight. Coming up here as I go above the house, please pay attention to the descent after I go around the tree and I go down. Mainly that's the top speed that you're going to get. I think another important call out is the very limited camera angle. Not because of the housing, but because of that VTX, the O3 VTX, and how it's mounted. The camera cable actually wraps around the VTX, so there's very little slack space in there. And unfortunately, probably due to the location and proximity to the props, they really couldn't allow a lot of slack space, or it might get into the prop line. So I typically fly these a lot faster, and I call out that little dive because that's kind of the top speed you're going to see in this particular video, because I really can't fly it faster unless I can increase the camera angle. We can fly it faster with the low camera angle, but then we're just looking at the ground all the time. I didn't see where that would be potentially all that useful. So, you know, you can disagree with me, that's okay. But I think if you're looking at this as something to add to your fleet, that you need to be aware that the very limited camera angle, I mean, I'll show it to you when we get back to the desk. I'll take the screws out, loosen the screws up so you can see what little movement. It's literally like 3, maybe 4 degrees of additional camera angle that we can get from what you see here. So this is definitely one of those cinewhoops, cinematic flyers. You could definitely, you know, use it for exploration or tree surfing or any other sort of flat flying. It's just not going to be something that you're going to try to freestyle, and that's one of the things that I tend to do over and over and over again with these, is to fly them faster, more aggressively, doing the aerobatics or the maneuvers that are more freestyle oriented on all quads that come to the channel. But in this case, I just didn't think it was feasible because of that limited camera angle. It's interesting that they actually put that print or that plastic molding. It actually looks like a print to me. You can kind of see some of the print lines around the outer edge. It does give it some color, some design flair, specifically because, you know, they're aiming at that 250 gram limit, which is kind of their theme or motto of the company, being Sub250, as well as being important for other flight restriction purposes. And you can get under 250 with their recommended battery. Of course, we get right at about 250 with the 650 milliamp battery, which came in at a flight time this style at 6 minutes and 12 seconds. The 850 milliamp battery that I showed you from Beta FPV, that lava battery, that came in at 8 minutes and 15 seconds. And those are kind of averages. They all came in about that, but I try to land and then try to not necessarily calculate, because I don't want to make it sound scientific, but when I look at my landing voltage after multiple flights on these same batteries, then I'll kind of get a feel for what about the average is, depending upon sometimes batteries at the very end when I start to push and we get down on cell voltage by you know 3.4 and 3.37, that sometimes I got to hustle home and the batteries don't quite recover as far as I need to end at that 3.5 volts, which I try to end all the flights as close as I can to 3.5 volts, but that doesn't always happen. You know, it's hard to fly and concentrate and stare at that OSD. Speaking of the OSD, you can see the flight time in the lower right. You can see that it's in air mode, which is kind of the mode you show all the time. This is not stabilized flight. This is acro or rate mode, as many people call it, where you're in full control of everything that the quad's doing. Some additional information across the bottom row there. The other important factors within the OSD is I go by average cell voltage, because I fly everything from a 1S to, well, every once in a while I get up to 6S, but that's something that I go by as average cell voltage. It's easier for me to keep that in my mind rather than trying to figure that out on the fly. As we kind of finish out through that tree and got a little close to some of that scraggle. The last thing on the OSD that I'll mention in the top left-hand corner, that is our throttle value. That's how much stick traveled we've given it in the flight that you're seeing on screen. I've talked so long, we've gotten to 5 minutes, and we've only got another minute and a half to go, so I'll just continue to let this roll. You can see I'm not wearing a jacket. Pretty nice weather this particular flight. This came well before Thanksgiving, because right about Thanksgiving it got super rainy and it got cold, and then it snowed here just a few days ago. I don't think we got a full inch of snow. So that would make close to 8 inches of snow that we've gotten in the 2 snowstorms that we've had so far. I do have high hopes that that snow will melt away and dry out so that I can return to flying. I do have a few more items that have come in that I do need to do some more flying on before I post my reviews. I should call out for those that pay close attention at this time. You might be watching this video while I'm out on vacation. I will do my best to respond to all the comments as I typically do. I normally have to do that from my phone, so looking up additional information, it's not something I'm great at when it comes to using my phone. Yeah, I know you can do it. It's one of those things that it's tedious for me as an IT person that's used to using multi-monitors, that when I have that single small screen, switching back and forth between apps, looking stuff up to be able to answer some of those comments. So if you leave comments during that time on vacation, they may be fairly brief, but I will do my best. We've come in for our landing. You saw our voltage got clear down to what, 3.25 volts per cell, and then the battery recovered up to 3.51 volts per cell. So the first thing I want to draw out, hopefully you can see it. Let me get a flashlight out. I don't have quite enough studio lighting in here. So can you see the O3 camera MIPI cable right there, that braided section right there? So that goes from the camera all the way around to the VTX. So that means, like, this is the angle that I was pretty much flying at, because there's not much more. Like, and if I push this up just a little bit, that's pulling on that cable. You probably can't see it moving in there, but that pulls on the cable. And I would caution anyone against flying with the camera secured, you know, putting much pressure on this up angle to, you know, my concern is if you do hit something, if you have a crash and that cable is real taut, you could damage the cable connectors, or even worse, damage the connector on the camera or the VTX. So I would actually leave it pretty loose, kind of where it naturally wants to sit, and then tighten up your camera from there. I wouldn't put any pressure on the camera in order to get that extra, geez, I don't know. Is that even 2 or 3 degrees maybe? I mean, yeah, if you go from flat to up, there's probably 10 degrees maybe. But yeah, there's just not much slack in there. So that is a limitation of this design. I do think there's opportunities to do things that are different. They could have built a cable holster into this somewhere and then allowed us to maybe, you know, slide a little bit more cable out as we increase the camera angle, because the canopy does have space for us to go up a bit more. Even with pressure on it, you can see we've still got some space above the camera that we could have changed the camera angle to. And the camera screws are accessible. They're right down in there. It's not a big deal. You know, this shifts around a little bit, so if you need to get your hex driver in there to loosen or tighten that up, it's not a big deal. It's readily accessible. They made this mount to where you have that little gap and you can get your screwdriver right down in there. You can see I just stuck a little EP2 receiver, at least I think it's an EP2, out here on the arm. I did that just because it's easy for me to do, so I don't have to completely disassemble the quad. I do think in most cases with bind and flies, it's always easier to buy it with the receiver, and I suspect most people are doing that, but they do offer a plug and play version, which is what they ship me, and that's something to be careful of in the ordering process. You know, just get it with a receiver. Express LRS receivers are so inexpensive that I don't know. To me, it's just not worth the hassle of having to disassemble something like this, or taking in a really tedious process of getting a receiver mounted in there. And by the way, they didn't include any sort of antenna mount. So if you put a receiver like underneath the flight controller and you ran a T-style antenna out here, you're probably going to have to do something to secure the T-style antenna back here, because they didn't include a antenna mount for this. This is another pusher configuration. The theory behind that is it increases efficiency. And it could. I don't know. Never studied it. But sometimes I get questions. Oddly enough, I get questions of, is this a pusher configuration? Yeah. Anytime the motors are pointing down, that's a pusher configuration. Now, your props don't go on upside down. Your props go on just like the motor is pointing up. So if you change out your props, don't get it twisted. You know, see the high side here on the prop pitch? That rotates this way. That generates lift. So that's one way you can just visually look at a quad and you know it's a pusher configuration, and then you know how the props go on as well. It doesn't. You don't flip the prop over just because the motor's upside down. You put the prop on because it generates its most efficient thrust in this particular manner. I called out the quick specs, but this little carriage, I guess I should call it, holster mounting for the O3 and the VTX is gummy mounted. I don't know how much that's doing us for flight video. This feels, it's not stiff, of course, but they're fairly substantial gummies, and I just don't know how much vibration dampening it's actually doing. It is there. You saw the results, and I've got some GoPro video playing up here of my flight so you can see that as well. We have metal standoffs that are used to mount the prop protection to the top plate. You can see them up front here, and then you can see them here in the center. And then I think, yeah, this looks like here in the back that we've got standoffs, metal standoffs in the back as well. It's not just this 3D printer. That's actually a plastic mold back here holding that on. There's actually metal standoffs in there as well. We don't have any motor wire tape on here, and that's one other thing that I tend to look at. Let's just kind of check it live to see how far it'll come up. Yeah, I don't think there's any problems. They've shortened the motor wires, at least on this unit. But, again, if you get one, this is a check you should do. Not putting a lot of pressure, just kind of pulling the motor wires up to see if they get in the prop line. In this case, they won't. That's fine. For a little added extra protection, I always like to use what I call Emex tape or motor wire tape. It's linked way down in the video description. I think there's an Amazon link and one other reseller for where I have purchased it from before, because there's a lot of other tape that visually looks just like it. But there's this one particular kind that we find most oftentimes used, and I've been putting it on my own builds and applying it to quads like this after the fact. And the main reason why I like it better over stuff they call hockey tape or gaffer's tape or anything like that is it applies pretty well. It doesn't add hardly any weight. And as you get grass, dirt, other debris, it doesn't get stuck to the outside of the tape. Some of the tape is kind of a fabric tape, and it can really pick up debris, and I don't care for that. So you can see we've got some slack space for our DJI 3 antenna that runs from way up here all the way back. And, that's kind of a necessary evil with this particular mount, but it is something to keep aware of, is that if you come in and this is sticking down below the bottom plate, which, you just pop it up. If you come sliding in, that you could get some wear on that, but maybe not, because we do have all these feet across all the different points of the quad, so it would have to be really hanging out there, and I don't think that would happen very often. But if it does, just kind of shove it up to one side or another to where the carbon fiber is helping to hold it up in there. There technically is a option to use different sizes of batteries that might not fit in that top tray by running a strap and have it bottom mounted. If that's something that you actually want to do, they did design this, to be a very slim profile. That's something else with that vertical mount, is that oftentimes with these DJI 3s, we get kind of a bulky stack or profile on our quads. But what if it mounted up here in this kind of space? Then we can put the battery behind here that, it really slims everything down, which is, I don't know, it's an interesting thing. Whether it actually makes any sort of performance difference or not, it's really hard to say. You'd have to put it in like a wind tunnel or something like that in order to figure out the aerodynamics and the efficiencies of gaining a lower profile. It should, in theory, but I don't have any facts to bear that out. You can also see, hopefully right back there, the DJI 3 is connected to the flight controller via a connector, which is a good thing. So if by chance you needed to remove it, you can just pop that connector out, and you could have this whole assembly kind of move away for repairs, or adding your GPS module, or replacing the receiver if it goes bad, or what have you. So that is the DollyFly25 from Sub250. Let me know specifically what you thought of the video footage. I did have those consistent 12-mile-an-hour winds. Unfortunately, that's just something that I suffer from. I can hold on to a quad for weeks on end, and I might get one day in a 2-week period where the winds are actually down below 10 miles an hour. That just doesn't happen very often. And there's a very small sprinkling throughout the course of the year where I'll have it even lower, where it might be 6 or less miles an hour. It's just it's a windy location, and there's not much I can do about that, so I go ahead and fly it and try to pick the best day out of those flights. As far as environment, sun is one of the things I look for. Is it sunny out? So let me know what you thought of the footage of this. Did it look stable to you? To me, it did, but I am not a very good judge of that, I don't think. I think other people have a finer eye, so that's something that I want some feedback from the community on this particular quad, and really all quads. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comment section below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.